Hi there, my name is John Renzulli. I'm the founder and CEO of Chicken Bone VFX. We work on episodic television series for all the major streaming platforms. And our focus is primarily episodic television. We also work on some features as well. We are a virtual company. We've been around since 2011, and our labor force is distributed. They're all over the place, mostly in the United States, but in other countries as well. And we really love the things that we do. We love being a part of tight collaborations and telling stories and being, in large part, just the invisible, making the pieces of the story that we're creating, making them fit in context. And, a lot of the effects we do are invisible, and we kind of pride ourselves on that. That's a question that we actually get asked a lot. It was a nickname given to me by one of my producer friends at Zoic Studios when we were working on a show called Fringe. Jay Worth was VFX supervising at the time. And this producer friend of mine, Chris Wright, loved to give nicknames to his coworkers. And the theme that year was magic, but I rejected all of the names that I was given one by one until later on in the season, we had a complicated effect that just came up during the normal process of the show, and we had to accomplish it in 2D instead of 3D because the show didn't have the budget for it, and it was breaking a chicken bone in half and landing on a metal plate. I was the lead artist on that particular shot and broke the chicken bone successfully in half in 2D. And when I came into the dailies to get the shot finaled, Chris said, "Hey, Chicken Bone." And I knew that one was going to stick, that nickname was going to stick. So I let him have it. He actually, about 3 or 4 months later, became my first bona fide client. And I tongue-in-cheek named the DBA Chicken Bone VFX as a wink and a nod to Chris. And from that point on, it really became our brand. And so we named the corporation Chicken Bone VFX, and it's how we're known today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm Arisa Blassingame. I'm the head of production at Chicken Bone VFX, and I was the producer for The Queen's Gambit. So we actually started early on in the process with script breakdown for this show. We had previously worked on the Netflix series Godless with Mick Aniceto and Scott Frank. And so they contacted us pretty early when they were just starting to concept ideas for The Queen's Gambit. And, we had some in-depth conversations about the chess pieces primarily, and what Scott's vision was for them, and how we could help him bring that vision to life. And so we started working up some preliminary concepting to sell the idea that we could do this for him. And kind of long story short, he ended up picking us to be the primary vendor, and we carried the show all the way through to the end.
Hi, I'm John Madja. I'm the visual effects supervisor for The Queen's Gambit. So after the initial concept test for the chess pieces, basically we worked with Scott and talked through the storyboards that were put together for the various chess sequences in the show. The other thing that we had done was, while scouting locations, we had discussed with Scott and Stephen Meisler, the DP, and Uli Hanich, the production designer, on where visual effects would take over, what we'd like to see in some of these various places, and how we would transform Berlin and Toronto into Moscow, New York, Paris, and all the other fantastic places that we travel to in the show. So besides that, we had looked a lot at the set design, schematics, and basically worked through a lot of the details in pre-production.
Yeah, I think, the biggest, most obvious visual effect in the show is the chess pieces. And I think that was definitely a favorite of ours to create. It allowed us to be incredibly collaborative with Scott Frank and the rest of the production and post-production team to bring this concept to life. It evolved quite a bit from start to finish. So it was kind of, a ride all the way through. And it was just a really rewarding effect to have worked on so hard for a long period of time, and then to see on screen now and to see it getting such great reviews. I think that has to be kind of the top of my list for favorite. But John, do you have any others?
I'd have to say probably, of course, besides the chess pieces, we had so many shots where we did, set extensions and matte paintings for all of the various locations in the show. Things that come to the top of my mind, a full environment for Las Vegas seen in an aerial perspective, and the same scene on the ground going into the Mariposa Hotel, Mexico City, a couple different places in Moscow. I mean, really, the list kind of goes on. I mean, it was really just a fantastic show to be a part of, and to be able to help Scott tell the story and create all these different places.
Yeah, I think I have to say, for me, I definitely agree with John that the set extensions are some of the more fun and interesting pieces of the show. But it was also challenging, kind of in the sense that it had to be period accurate. We're kind of going through the 50s and 60s in the show, and we had to not only create these places, but we had to create them with a lot of period accuracy. So there's a lot of detail and research that went into making them, not just there in Berlin, replacing Berlin with these various disparate places all over the world, but also making them period accurate. I think for me, watching the planes come to life was a lot of fun too. We did 3 different aerial shots of jets during the series. Those are fun to watch, particularly the last one where the plane is landing in the rain. That was a fun one for me.
And as far as the chess pieces go, bringing those to life, the chess pieces themselves are composed of over 20 different layers and simulations. Our CG supervisor, Brendan Fitzgerald, and our compositing supervisor, Sam Kim, basically led the charge on the look development process, which was highly iterative as we honed in on Scott's vision for the pieces. We based the design on, we did some early sketches, for the chess pieces, and basically where we landed, we decided that they should be more close to Beth. So the design actually is very similar to the chess pieces that she plays with Mr. Scheibel in the basement when she's a child, and that sort of carries through the entire story as the pieces are personal to her.
Yeah, and the evolution of bringing them to life, there was a early discussion that we had with Scott Frank, that was all about these chess pieces being an object of comfort to Beth, very ominous presence in the room to the audience. So that was something that we had to keep in mind as we not only established the look, but also established how they descend from playing and how they move and how that corresponds with Beth's. And there's a little, most viewers have probably picked up on it, but there's her hand movements in certain shots in the dormitory scene correlate with her play. And there was a lot of subtleties that worked into these scenes that we needed to make sure we stayed true to all the way through all 7 episodes, of just how she interacts with them and what they mean to her. And then contrastly, kind of what they mean to the audience, and getting those 2 things to align over the course of the 7 episodes in, for everyone, Beth and the audience together.
Yeah, one other fun detail, of course, with chess pieces is how do the pieces move and what are they doing? And we had worked very closely with the show's chess advisors to figure out not just moves that were correct and accurate to the game of chess, but also moves that were visually engaging to the audience. So when you're watching these scenes, it's exciting and you're trying to figure out what's going on in Beth's mind, and also displaying some of her brilliance. And it seems the chess community out in the world has kind of taken note of the accuracy of all the chess throughout the show, CG and otherwise.
Just gonna kind of marry some of the answers that we had, kind of said before, in that we were working on both a period piece and these chess pieces at the same time, and that in and of itself proved quite a challenge. There were just a number or a wide variety of shots across the show. John, do you want to expand on that or jump in with what you were going to say?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so besides the obvious challenge of creating these very intricate chess piece visions, we had so many different locations that we traveled to in the show. It's not like most period shows, you maybe you're in one place in New York, Paris, wherever the show is set, but in our show we had to research so many different places, and over the course of probably a 10-year time span between the 1950s and 1960s. So we really had to figure out what buildings look like in Moscow and Mexico City and Las Vegas back then. What buildings were under construction, for example, like Caesar's Palace wasn't even built yet; it was halfway done. And yeah, and figuring out the right models of cars, and how to fill all these environments with crowds of people as well, because they're cities and they have to be populated. So there were so many different challenges, and we had like over 700 shots. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I think I have to agree with John. I mean, he's really hitting on some of the points that made this show challenging. I think in addition to that, we're a 4K native shop, and we work on 4K material all the time. But this show presented a very interesting challenge for us, because we had to do 4K UHD in the context of these very, very long shots. And I don't necessarily know that the average viewer would notice how long each shot is, because it's just paced so well. The editorial team did an amazing job putting it together. But there are these big, long, kind of drawn out shots into the thousands and thousands of frames, and making the effects work, and and making the effects work along with some of the technological challenges of how to handle that much data, were, I think, a big part of how we see the show as challenging. And we were definitely able to overcome it, but it was a really important, it was something we were not quite as familiar with, working on very long shots with very, very intricate detail, with all the different types of effects that we were trying to achieve in the context of the story. And so that was a really interesting challenge as well, to see how we get through that, and how we manage data, and how we can review things cleanly. And thankfully, it was something we being a virtual company, something we were already used to. Having the large majority of the post being done inside of the context of the pandemic, did create a little bit of a challenge, but not nearly as much of a challenge as it would have if we weren't set up to be virtual to begin with. And so I think it lent itself, I mean, us being virtual as we were, lent itself well to helping the show move right along in spite of the pandemic.
Yeah, we had a fantastic team of artists on the show, fortunately, who were really just the best of the best. We really couldn't have asked for a better team to have with us on this project. And
Absolutely.
given the context of the pandemic, part of what we had to ensure was that the artists felt supported, both in terms of everything that they were creating, and also, just making sure that mentally that everyone was doing okay.
Yeah.
Because it was a really challenging time for the world. It still is, in many senses.
I think in terms of visual effects, how it evolved over time, a lot of that was in the set extensions for the different cities that Beth got to travel to. We started to go abroad, overseas to Paris and Moscow, and just had more locations, in a quicker succession in the later episodes. So that, in a visual effects sense, like that definitely evolved for us from the orphanage all the way to Moscow. As chess pieces go, it was something kind of interesting that I alluded to earlier, in that the chess pieces were a character that was really familiar to Beth. And so those pieces actually never changed throughout the episode, were always a constant for her. John mentioned that we modeled them after the pieces that she plays in the basement with Mr. Scheibel, and that she learns on. And so they were an object of comfort to her that she would always return to throughout various gameplay and various tournaments, and any time that she basically felt like she was getting out of her element, or maybe falling behind in a game, or anything where she needed to realign herself with her innate love and ability for chess, she would call on these chess pieces to kind of be that comfort object for her. And so we modified them, per lighting conditions in different scenes and things like that, but the shape and the look of them never actually changed. So that's actually something, as Beth gets older, that's the one constant that remains the same all throughout the series.
Yeah. As far as the environments go, something that we tried to be mindful of was, what was the tone of the story at that point in the story? What should the lighting feel like? What should the sky feel like? How can we extend using visual effects the tone of a scene? To really make sure that when you're in Russia, it feels a little bit more ominous. It's a little dark, and in Mexico, there's sort of a sort of a sweet vibe in the air. It's hard to put into words, but in image, there's a really sweet moment with Beth and her mother, and we tried not to take away from that by having anything that was too distracting in the background of the scene. Just small things like that, but really just being mindful of the story and how our work relates to that.
Yeah, I think a way to put it, we were kind of, in terms of the set extensions and the period piece component, we were just supporting what was already there from production, the set design and the costumes and makeup on Beth, like all of that was impeccable. And so we were just there to make sure that that was shining and the dialogue was shining, and we were portraying a really accurate picture of whatever city she was in and whatever the tone for that scene was going to be. So, we played a lot into that to just create something that was going to be beautiful in addition to what had already been shot.
One of the things that's coming up for us that will be released on November 10th is Dash and Lily, another Netflix project that we are proud to be a part of. So definitely check that out. There are other things cooking. We can't really talk about them as much right now, but do check out Dash and Lily. And if you haven't seen the Queen's Gambit yet, definitely please check it out. We're very, very proud to be a part of the collaboration with Scott Frank and Mick Aniceto on this project. John and Riz have absolutely been amazing during the course of this project, and we're very grateful to them and the team that they led here at Chicken Bone VFX to make that story really shine. And so please check it out. It'll be worth it, I promise.
And if you want to see one of the examples of the long shots that John and Johnny were talking about, go ahead and rewatch the opening Vegas shot and just don't blink until the camera blinks.
Yeah.
You'll be in for a little bit of a ride.